Welcome to the Peer Review Podcast, Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. I'm Sarah Bunin-Benor. In each episode, my co-host Mira Sukharov and I speak to fellow scholars and other experts about how to live a good academic life. Today, I will be interviewing Dr. Jair Siqueira-Neto. Jair is an internationally recognized leader in drug discovery for tropical infectious diseases. He's a professor and director of the Screening Corps at the UC San Diego Skaggs School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. He's a native of Brazil, and he earned his PhD in microbiology, genetics, and molecular biology from the State University of Campinas. And he's done a lot of research in Korea, in California, in various institutions there. And now he also serves as Associate Director of the Center for Drug Discovery and Innovation. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Can you just start by telling us briefly about your research?
Yes. So I try to find new medications for neglected tropical diseases. We call this disease neglected diseases because they typically affect a population that cannot afford expensive medication. Therefore, there's less incentive for pharmaceutical companies to develop medications for these diseases. So being in an academic university, public university, I think that's part of our goal to try to fill that gap. So my research is to try to identify these new candidates to treat these infectious diseases.
And what are some of the diseases you've focused on?
So I'm part of a center called the Center for Discovery and Innovation in Parasitic Diseases. We cover about 10 different diseases. My core research is on two of these. One is called leishmaniasis. The other one is called Skaggs disease. So leishmaniasis can cause skin disease, or it can also be visceral. So it can attack visceral organs, and it's a lethal form of the disease. The current medications for these diseases are really not adequate, either because there is very high rate of resistance of parasites, or they're very toxic. And for Skaggs disease, it's actually a chronic condition. You can get infected when you're young, and you may not even have any symptoms, but the symptoms might develop 20, 30 years after you were infected. And this comes in form of cardiac inflammation, and it can also cause inflammation on digestive organs like the gut, and it's lethal in both forms. So it's very debilitating. And currently, there's no good medication, especially for chronic phase of this disease. It's very hard to treat. So the only way out would be, for example, heart transplantation.
Oh, wow. So on our podcast, we've talked to mostly scholars in humanities and social sciences. And when we talk about public engagement, it's not on these kinds of life or death issues. So I'm really glad to talk to someone who's really working on this kind of important thing. So tell us a little bit about the various jobs that you've had, and have any of them been tenure track, or have they all been based on grants?
Yeah, for faculty position, it's all based on grants. Prior to that, I had an appointment at UCSF as a scientist. The position was called specialist, but I became part of the Center for Discovery and Innovation in Parasitic Diseases at UCSF, and that was also covered by grants. My role was 100% on the research. I didn't need to do any teaching there. And prior to that, I was a postdoc in South Korea, again, basically funded by grants. And now currently at UCSD, where I have my faculty appointment, it's also 100% funded by grants.
Well, this must be a tough time for that kind of contingent position, right?
Yeah, we're facing some changes in landscape for funding, especially. So we have to identify new opportunities in this area and ways that I can still uh, find how I can contribute in the current circumstances in a more meaningful way with the
Hmm.
resources that are available.
Yeah. And so do you teach classes too?
I do teach. I don't do a lot of teaching. I teach on few classes for a few courses on pharmaceutical chemistry, one course on drug discovery and development, most for grad students. I don't teach for undergrads. Uh, I would say 90% of my time is dedicated to research and the leadership on the screening core here at UCSD as well.
And so is your team made up of grad students, postdocs, like who's on your team?
Yeah, so as part of the center, we have grad students, we have postdocs, research associates, undergrad students. We often get visiting scholars from different countries as well. It's part of our mission to train people in the different assays and the different science that we're doing in our center. We get even sometimes high school students during the summer to learn on research. So it's very diverse in terms of the people that are part of the team.
Hmm. That's great. So what parts of your job do you find the most fulfilling?
So it can be fulfilling in different ways. I'm very happy when I'm teaching someone and they're learning some new skills. But I think the core mission for me and really the value that I see in my work is to be able to identify something that would change someone's life in case a disease, something that we can treat and give them another chance. So I think that's really what drives me in the research. So every little experiment that we try and we get something that is important, it's like a spark. Oh my God, yeah, that's why I'm doing this. That's what excites me. So this comes in a daily basis. Sometimes, we reach big milestones. So these are the things that really excite me in the work.
Wow. Yeah, that is just an amazing feeling to know that your research may have saved someone's life or hundreds
Yeah,
and thousands,
absolutely.
hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
lives, right?
Yeah, it requires a lot of resilience because it's a very long process. I mean, it's not something you can get in a week or in a month or even in a few years. So we're talking about a process that takes probably 10 years or more. So you have to reach each step in a slow steps in a daily basis. So in the end, you can actually come up with that final medication that will reach a patient.
Wow. Did you ever work for a pharmaceutical company?
I have worked in collaboration with pharmaceutical companies almost throughout my entire career. So, especially in this area of neglected disease, the current business model involves a lot of academic and industry organizations. So, the way it typically works is that the industry would provide their chemical matter. We call it libraries of compounds. And we test in the assays that are developed and run at the academic institution. So we get the results together, we analyze them, and that's how the collaboration is established. So you identify the good candidates, so you have to make chemical modifications on the molecule to try to optimize the activity against the infectious disease, for example, reduce potential side effects. So that's all done in collaboration, in partnership with pharmaceutical companies. So I have worked a lot with the pharmaceutical industry, but not directly in the pharmaceutical industry.
Do you think that your colleagues who work directly for pharmaceutical companies have a different experience than you do?
In what sense?
Well, I guess in every sense, I guess they're not going to be teaching. They're just going to be
Oh
doing
yeah,
the research, right? So in terms of their day-to-day work, but then also
yeah.
the remuneration.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit different in terms of the overall goals, if you will. So in academia, we have, I think, more freedom to ask whys. For example, we're investigating a drug and it fails in an experiment. In academia, we will always try to understand why that happened. And in industry, I think you're more pragmatic. You really need to find the good drug. So if something fails in an experiment, you win that and you move to the next one because the goal is really to bring that medication to the patient. So I think it's complementary in a way, and I value both perspectives. But in academia, as I said, we have the freedom to investigate things more in depth, more fundamental aspects of the biological systems in and in the other hand, in industry, really the goal is to bring that medication to the patient.
Yeah. And my understanding is that industry would pay higher salaries. Is that true in your field?
I believe it is. I believe it's the case that industry probably pays higher than in academia. It's common that we train students and postdocs in the center, for example. They know how to operate the different instruments, and then they get a position in industry, and then they move. So this is a common trend.
Yeah, that makes sense. So which parts of your job do you find the least fulfilling?
Um, Least fulfilling. That's a good question. I think sometimes we get distracted with different activities you have to do as being faculty. So it's not least fulfilling, but it takes your attention from actually doing science. So you have to participate in different committees. There are many different meetings you have to attend. I mean, the faculty have to run the university, so that there's administrative tasks that you're expected to take as well. So I would say that's the time that when I'm not really focusing on the science is probably where I get the least excitement.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how does a day look for you? Like tell us about an average working day.
Yeah, so usually I review what kind of activities I have to do in the day. It's typically 20-30% of the time in meetings, another 20-30% of the time meeting with students and lab members. And then the rest is writing manuscripts, writing grants, reviewing manuscripts. It's all part of our activities as an academic member. I still have at least 20% of my time allocated just for managing the screening core. So, for example, if there is a new faculty at the university that wants to use one of the instruments, I have to meet with them, understand their project, and see how it would fit in the platform, uh, and also manage how to train their student to operate the instruments. So it's never boring. There's always new things we have to learn, and to dedicate time for.
Yeah. Okay, so that's an average working day or a bunch of different days. What's an ideal working day like for you?
Or an ideal working day, I mean, um, I think it would be really focusing on time to come up with new ideas. I think I miss that, some free time just to be creative. We typically have our days really busy with things that you have to accomplish. So I think a perfect day for me would be a day that I have at least a couple hours a day just to have free time to think about new and great ideas.
Yeah, I guess often that happens in the process of writing grant applications, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I guess that's when you already have an idea that you're then trying to find money for.
Yeah. It's typically how it works.
So how would you work to come up with new ideas? Just reading, thinking, like what would you do?
Yeah. I think it's mostly through reading and interacting with different faculty, attending workshops or talks, especially when it's something not related directly to your area. So you see someone doing something that you find, oh, I think I can apply that to my research. So I think the greatest ideas come when you're, listen to someone that is not related to your area at all.
Mm. So interdisciplinary contacts are productive.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. These are key for new disruptive ideas always involved areas that are totally different, I guess.
Mm. Have you collaborated with anyone in a different field?
Yeah, I do that often through the screening core. There's an interesting story for a Zika project that I was working on. So when we had the Zika outbreak in Brazil, I'm Brazilian and I didn't work on virus, but I felt like I had to do something in that sense. So I started working with the virus, and the problem with Zika is when a pregnant woman gets infected, that virus can affect the development of the fetus, the brain of the fetus. So we have to find different cells that would be relevant for the in vitro assay to try to find new drugs. So we started working with little brain organoids, and that was a collaboration with a colleague of mine here at UCSD, Alison Mortry. And there was another group that worked on glioblastoma, so brain cancer. And we actually tried the virus against the brain cancer cells. And the virus infected pretty well some of these cells. So at that point, we were using the models just to understand how to treat the pregnant women to kill the virus, to prevent them from causing any harm in these brain cells. But it turns out that the virus was so effective at killing the cancer, the brain cancer, that we thought about an idea of developing a mutated virus to be used as an oncolytic virus, so something that could be used to treat the glioblastoma itself. So use the virus, modify the virus so it's safe enough not to cause disease, but to attack specifically the cancer cells. So, that I was not in the cancer area, I was not in the virus area, but through these collaborations and interactions, the project came to be something totally different from what it started.
Oh, wow. Well, it seems from the way you just described that and the way you've described other things in this interview that you're really good at explaining complicated concepts for a general audience. Have you done a lot of that? Have you written articles for the general public or given lectures?
Yeah, during the COVID pandemic, I was astonished with the amount of misinformation that was being spread everywhere. So at that time, I started to try to communicate more with the public, and I actually ended up giving some lectures at the schools here in Brazil. I had constant meetings with a group of physicians that they wanted to learn what was actually something they could rely or not based on what was the science discovering at that time, because things were so fast, and because of all the misinformation that was being spread, it was really hard to keep up with all the literature and see what we can trust or not. So at that time, I dedicated a good chunk of my time to do communication for general public and even specialized public in Brazil. And it was very fulfilling. I mean, fulfilling in a way, and disappointing in others, because you learn that you never be able to fight all the disinformation. So that's hard sometimes, but I think we have to do our parts. I may need to do more of this communication with the general public. I feel it's important, but again, it's the matter of finding the time to do that, and the right channels, and how to be effective, how to reach to a larger audience. It's not easy. I
Does
wish you
you
had that kind of training. Yeah. in general because we're not trained to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And what about your university? Do they support you in doing that kind of public engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. Even nowadays through social media, we have someone here that is dedicated to public relationships. So every time we have a new result that is interesting to the public, we're encouraged to reach out to this person and write an article in a local news or national news when something more relevant. So yeah, totally. The university encourages us to do this kind of communication.
Hmm. And how often do you go to conferences, academic conferences?
Typically once or twice a year. It depends on funding always, but yeah, it's around that.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like your work is a little bit more collaborative than the work of a lot of people in the humanities, for example. And so, do you write your articles with colleagues always, or are you ever the solo author?
Yeah, no, it's always in collaboration, multiple hands. You typically have one person that will lead the article, but there's always many pieces that are written by different individuals. And typically either the first author or the corresponding author, which is the senior, typically the PI, will be responsible for putting it all together and have the final version before submission.
And so, do you use any tools to make the writing styles more consistent?
Not really. I mean, we use tools to manage references, for example, but in terms of writing styles, not really. And as
Yeah.
long as the science is well written, it's okay.
But it seems like a lot of your work is project management because you're not just
Yeah.
managing the experiments and the team, but also the writing process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have to do everything as a faculty. You have to manage the writing, the management of the people, the resources, establish the goals, the milestones, make sure you're on track. Um, yeah,
Do you get trained on project management in grad school?
not really, maybe by instinct. We already have as a faculty, or at least I had, a very well structured way to do things that is exactly how it's taught in business schools.
Did you go to business school after your PhD in science?
Yeah, so I had my PhD, I defended my PhD in 2007 and I got my MBA in 2025. So
Why,
many
why
years
did,
after.
wow, why did you decide to pursue the MBA?
I think to get a better business view on projects and in science in general. So that was my idea. And eventually, I still consider making a transition to industry. So I think the MBA would help at least to learn in a more business way how to operate in industry. So that was my goal.
Do you know how common that is? Do you have other colleagues who've done that kind of thing?
Uh, I don't think it's uncommon. I know other people with a PhD that did an MBA, but not in my close relations. I don't know anyone.
Okay, so we've asked some of our other interviewees about tools that they use for their own productivity. In your case, I'll ask you that, but what tools do you use for project management and productivity, not just of yourself, but of the various teams that you work with?
Yeah, I think the main one is my calendar. So I even things that I have to do, let's say a month from now, I have some notes on my today calendar that I have these in 1 or 2 months ahead. So that's my main tool for management. And then for specific projects, I can use different tools like Microsoft projects, for example. I learned how to use that during the MBA, and it's a great tool. You can add even costs for things. So to write grants, for example, that's a tool that helps a lot because before I was doing things in spreadsheet, and you can really organize things better using some of these tools. And yeah, the other one is really just the calendar, the agenda.
Do you ever have the experience of getting to that thing that you put in your calendar a month in advance and saying, "Oh, I'll just put that off another month," and then doing that multiple times?
I try not to, but sometimes it happens, and you have to rate things in terms of priorities. Maybe it's something that is not high priority, and something else comes up, so you have to manage that. Yeah, so it can happen, but I try not to.
Mhm. Okay, well, I certainly have that experience. But tell me about priorities. So, um, people have different priorities that drive their decisions in their career. And
Right.
tell us what some of your priorities are.
I think the priorities are really, I mean, just for the academic position, is based on the projects. The ones that are more late stage typically take priority, or something that would, for example, lead to a grant application, or if you're getting close to a deadline, so that takes priority. Uh, but just in general, I think for me would be rating what would have the most impact would be the items that would have higher priority, professionally speaking.
Hmm. And then what about in your life in general? What are some things that you do outside of your work to minimize stress and maximize happiness?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I have three kids, so they take a lot of my time outside the academia. I'm very active too. We like to go outdoors. We like camping. I'm trying to start playing soccer again. I used to play a lot when I was younger. So uh, riding bikes, just going to parks, walking my dog, um, going to the beach. We're in San Diego, so we have to take advantage of all the environment that we have in this area. So yeah, trying to just to be outdoors and with family, with friends. I think that's how I free up my mind from work.
And does that ever lead to epiphanies about work when you're away from your work?
Sometimes I try to not think too much about work, but it's just impossible. So, even when we travel for vacation, I'm constantly you still need to check emails. I still have meetings. So yeah, that happens sometimes when you're doing something totally unexpected or different from work. You come up with an idea, and then I have to write it down, and you say, okay,
Yeah.
I'll explore this more in depth later.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned email. That's something that I've struggled with is figuring out how to balance email with the rest of the things that I have to do because I get so much of it. So you said you do your email on vacation. Do you also check your email first thing in the morning? How often are you checking email each day?
Yeah, I never counted, but I checked frequently. I should probably have specific times to check emails. I would say more often than once in an hour for sure. Uh, First thing in the morning, not really. I used to, so I'm not doing that anymore. So I would do other things in the morning before I touch my phone. But when I get to my office, yes, that's the first thing I do when I get to the office is open the calendar and check emails. It probably goes in the first hour, just going through, responding things and make sure there's nothing falling behind, which happens sometimes too, especially with the amount of emails that I get. It's not uncommon that something just gets buried and I don't notice, and then I have to wait for a second email to remind that I didn't find the first one.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. So tell us about a time when you said no when someone asked you to do something.
Oh, when I said no, let's see. That would typically happen if I'm not able to do whatever it is. For example, in the context of the screening core, if someone needs to use or develop a specific assay that our instruments would not be capable of, then I will have to tell them we cannot do this just because it's a limitation from the system. Um, Other than that, in terms of time, I'm thinking if I ever said no because I didn't have time for something, I wouldn't probably say no, but rather I can't do it now. Um, but we would be able to work on something later on. I tend not to say no unless I really cannot do something.
Well, as a grant-based faculty member, do you still get asked to do internal service at your university?
Oh yeah, as a faculty, we all have to. So I still participate in different committees, and I still have to teach. Yeah, that's expected, even if you're just funded by grants.
Like what kinds of committees have you served on?
Oh, I have served on different committees. I was a member of the IACUC, which is the organization that deals with animal research. That's for the entire campus. I served that for 6 years. I have been a member for our admissions committee for 10 years now, I think. I'm probably the most senior member of that committee, and I enjoy that a lot. I have been member of committees for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and different other committees that are, temporary. I have served as well.
So at UCSD, is that where you did your MBA?
No, I did my MBA through University of São Paulo in Brazil. It's an online program.
So I was wondering if you would have gotten free tuition if you did it through UCSD.
Not really. No,
No.
I checked that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how many faculty members do that, make use of free tuition for programs at their own university. I hadn't
Yeah,
thought
that would
about
be
that before.
great if they offer that.
Yeah. So what are some challenges that you've encountered over the course of your career?
Oh, challenges. Let me think. Funding is always a challenge. I mean, you can only do what you have funds to do. So that's one thing. You have to be constantly looking for alternative funding sources. Another challenge, which is I think intrinsic from my position, is actually training people, and then when they get good at something, then they leave. But it's part of our job because as a faculty member, it's our mission to train people. But having that continuity sometimes um, is hard because people would stay for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and then they leave, and so there is a constant change in personal, which is not bad, but it can be challenging sometimes because then you need to train a new individual to run the assays.
Yeah, that does sound like a challenge. So what changes have you made in your career in general to help you become more fulfilled?
Well, I think, just focusing on projects that I think would be more impactful is something. Um, I really want to see what I'm doing will have a result that can benefit someone if I know I'm working on something that can have an impact.
You mean which research topics you pursue?
Yeah, which research topics and what exactly in that research. Yeah.
What do you mean? Can you give us an example of a time when you made a change like that in order to have more impact?
Yeah. So, for example, I would evaluate what's the probability of some project actually end up in a candidate for treatment. So that's how I would evaluate if that would have an impact or not. So as opposed to that would be a project to understand some proteins in a membrane of the parasite that doesn't have necessarily a direct impact on possible new drug discovery. So that would take less priority uh, because that might not lead to anything in terms of new treatment, for example.
Hmm. Okay, so the final question is, what do you wish you had known when you started your career?
Hmm. When I started my career, um, I think if I knew how much managing would be required for faculty, I would probably have taken my MBA earlier because I think we learn a lot of these management skills in a hard way. So I think I would probably have taken any formal training in management earlier on in my career.
Yeah, anything else you want to share?
Um, Maybe just a message for people to try to learn more about neglected diseases and how they can actually be impacted by neglected disease that affect one in every five individuals in the world. I think that would be my message. So, just to raise more awareness. Um, I think that's important.
How can people help with that?
Oh, help with that. I think just understanding how big is the problem would be a good way to start. And then, people can always reach out to their representatives so that they also learn how important these diseases are, not only for developing countries, but especially with, global warming and climate change, these diseases are affecting more and more people, even in the northern hemisphere. So these can have direct impact to people much closer than you might think. So how they can help, I think, is just learning more about it and again informing their representatives so they also learn. And there are always possibilities of donating to philanthropy or supporting organizations that are funding this kind of research, for example.
What are some of those organizations that fund that?
So aside from government, one of the major ones is the Gates Foundation. They support a good amount of research in neglected diseases. And there's other smaller organizations that would also support like smaller philanthropies, like family trusts that would help support research in neglected diseases.
Yeah, so my husband and I have prioritized that issue in our modest philanthropic giving. And so we've given to End Fund
Oh,
and the
no.
Carter Center and the Gates Foundation, Doctors Without Borders, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and some other similar organizations for specific neglected diseases. But I
Oh,
guess the Gates Foundation is probably one that is an umbrella for all those others, right? They give
yeah,
funding to a lot of different organizations and research institutes, right?
that's true. Yeah, and thank you very much for that, for supporting.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I want to just give a shout out to my brother-in-law, Barry Bunin, who connected us for this interview. Just tell us briefly how you know him.
Yeah, interesting. So when I was at UCSF, I think it was starting CDD at that time, and my supervisor was a close friend and one of the first users of the CDD Vault that Barry was starting the company.
What does that
So
tell us what it stands for?
Yeah, the collaborative drug discovery. It's a online platform. It's a cloud platform now. It's fancy to say cloud platform that you can add all your information about compounds and activities. So it's a way to manage results on drug discovery, for example, in a very safe way. You can uh, you can define who will have access to the information. It's an easy platform to share with collaborators, for example. So that's how I met him. It was through this tool that I started using 10 years ago, and I'm still a user of this tool. That's how I met Barry.
Oh, that's great. And I love that as a way to end because it really brings together some of the things we've been talking about here in terms of collaboration and making an impact on the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Jair Siqueira-Neto, for talking to us today and for all that you do to make the world a better place.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
The Peer Review podcast is produced and hosted by Sarah Bunin-Benor and Mira Sukharov. Talia Ehrenberg is assistant producer and editor. The music is written and performed by the Galactic Ambassadors. Support for this podcast comes from a faculty grant from Hebrew Union College. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can reach us at peerreview@huc.edu. You can join the conversation on Facebook at Peer Review, Cultivating Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. Thank you for listening.